We're on 94.9 this morning. It is 10 minutes past 8, and I'm with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. Good morning, Dr. John.
Good morning, Mick.
What a day. We've got now over 600 schools closed in New South Wales. That's New South Wales and Queensland, I believe. Crazy fires all over the place, but none here yet. It is a catastrophic fire danger. Of course, they're getting snow in Tasmania and possibly in Victoria today, which is a little strange. The police say that scammers are already jumping on phones, ringing people in regards to the fires, trying to get money. And politicians are out there spruiking the fires, saying, they're getting their own, leverage out of it, and calling it climate change.
Yeah, look, it's political opportunism at its worst, I think, Mick, because it wouldn't matter what it was, floods or cyclones or snow or whatever. It'd be climate change.
They're probably using the snow one in Victoria today. In Tasmania.
That's right. And the truth of the matter is it's got nothing to do with climate change. I mean, a bushfire is there because we've got bush. And when you've got the right climatic conditions, that bush is going to go up. And if you've got hot weather and if you've got unpredictable winds and low humidity and a tinder dry bush like we have because of the drought, then we are going to have bushfires.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. We love our sunburned country, but our sunburned country has bushfires. Yeah. And I think we just have to face the fact that they are part of our normal everyday life here in Australia, catastrophic though they are, and they're obviously terrible at the moment.
Yes.
But I was having a think over the weekend about this, and I was thinking about the target of the climate activists, and they seem to be targeting coal mining, particularly, and coal-fired power stations.
Yeah.
And I mean, if a government wanted to build a coal-fired power station again in Australia, there'd be riots. and yet, what is coal? Now, coal is ancient compressed vegetation.
Yeah.
And it contains carbon, and it contains hydrocarbons and structural carbohydrate. And when it burns, what does it produce? It produces carbon dioxide and water vapour and a whole lot of pollution,
Yep.
a whole lot of particulate matter. Now, if you compare that with a bushfire,
Yeah.
a bushfire is vegetable matter.
Yep.
It produces, when it burns, carbon dioxide and water vapour and particulate matter. So there's not a lot of difference between what happens in a coal-fired power station and what happens in a bushfire. And yet, in a coal-fired power station, it's controllable. In a bushfire, it's not controllable.
Definitely not. I mean, we sometimes see in cities overseas, they have, pollution or air quality sort of drops to very poor, and everyone puts their masks on. But around here today, they've just said, it was 17 minutes ago, I got an update, air quality readings for the Greater Sydney, Central Coast and Northern Tablelands and the Hunter Range from very poor to hazardous this morning. Out my window, it's not looking as bad as it did the other day, but of course there's parts of the coast that are covered in smoke, and it's because there's particle readings between 150 and 199 with over 200 in the Tablelands, and of course they're expecting it to get worse during the day, but it's the same sort of stuff as what comes out of your car.
That's exactly right. And when you do a comparison, I mean, I'm not sure how many coal-fired power stations would equal the current bushfire, but we've supposedly got, not supposedly, we have got 600 kilometres of the New South Wales eastern seaboard on fire, and that's quite a lot, and 1 million hectares already burnt out, and more to come. Yep. So that would produce a fair bit of greenhouse gases itself, and it's completely uncontrollable. So you hear plenty about the coal-fired power stations, but you don't hear much about the pollution that the bushfires put up, and that happens every year.
Yeah.
You know, I can't ever remember a year in my lifetime when we haven't had bushfires somewhere. If it's not New South Wales, it's Victoria. If it's not Victoria, it's Tasmania. And if it's not Tassie, it's South Australia or Western Australia. You know, somewhere in this country is going to go up every summer.
Yep, and it's generally straight after the Californian bushfires.
That's right, and
well.
they have their annual bushfires as well. So they do happen, and they do produce their own pollution. And as I see it, I would have thought that the pollution produced by a coal-fired power station is controllable, whereas the pollution produced by a bushfire, exactly the same pollution, is not controllable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you are on 94.9 this morning. It is at 8:15, but do beware, there is a catastrophic fire danger. Many schools, many childcare centres are closed today. Be prepared to move. They're already evacuating people on the northern beaches from old age homes, possibly here on the coast, I don't know yet. But just be prepared to move, because your life isn't worth losing. No evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Yes, we've got catastrophic fire danger today. Don't be afraid, just keep praying to God and be prepared. Absolutely be prepared. The fires near me website yesterday was chockers. It topped the charts across New South Wales and Queensland, and I'm sure the same thing will happen today. If it does go off air because too many people hit it, maybe you should keep your ear to the radio. We'll let you know if there's any issues, at least during the morning and early afternoon. And yes, we sort of pray for everybody who does, is affected, I guess, at this stage or becomes affected later. The conditions today are not looking particularly good. Anyway, I'm sitting in the studio with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. And Dr. John, last week we had a question come through. It said, interesting session this morning. What evidence and how do you present it to a 7-year-old that we were created, not evolved from monkeys? Avoiding the conflict, teacher said, parents said situation.
Yeah, well, look, it really is a problem, Mick, and that texted question came in as a result of what we were talking about last week. We were talking about how damaging evolutionary teaching has been to our society, and we particularly focus on the hopelessness that teaching seems to produce in people. Mm-hmm. If children are taught that they've come from nowhere, they're going nowhere, that this life is all there is, if that's what they're absorbing, and if they're in an apparently hopeless situation and a poverty trap and so on, and there doesn't seem to be any way out, then that would explain the extraordinarily high levels of mental illness and depression and suicidal thoughts and even suicide attempts that we see around us.
Yep.
And we mentioned last week how there was a dollar figure put on it in Australia, 180 billion a year as the cost to loss of productivity and things like that. I mean, that is just an astonishing amount of money. And we also talked about the solution that secular society comes up with, and that is throw more money at it, which is really all they can do. Now, obviously, more resources do need to be devoted to it, but what do you do if you're a Christian parent?
Yeah.
How do you get your children a grounding in the creation message and the truth of it, so that they're not persuaded by the evolutionary story, because they're certain to get that at school?
Yep.
And that question, how do you get it across to a 7-year-old? It's really vital that Christian parents start early. And I was just thinking about the way we have traditionally used children's Bible stories.
Yep.
Children's Bible books, actually. Yep. We've taught children Bible stories traditionally about Abraham and Isaac and Joseph's coat of many colours and Moses and the burning bush and David and Goliath. And although those stories are great and there's a lesson to be learned from them, they're not the stories that they're going to have attacked in the classroom.
Yeah.
The stories that are going to be attacked in the classroom are the Adam and Eve story, the temptation, the fall, entry of death into the world, Noah's Ark. They're the things that are going to be attacked in their secular society. And this is the sort of thing that they're going to hear at school. And parents need to be aware of just how powerful is the influence of a popular teacher. You know, the teacher has your child for quite a while, and a very popular teacher can get a lot of these things across, and you're in the position of having to try and combat that.
Yep.
And we better not forget either the babysitter over there in the corner that every home has got, and it's called a TV set.
Yep.
And they sit in front of that hour after hour, and they're going to get the same sort of thing absorbed from that.
And you've even mentioned before the old books and textbooks in the school where they even have some of the theories that have been debunked years ago still being taught.
Well, that's exactly right. And as this listener texted in, how do we get to combat the sort of information that they're getting? And really the short answer is creation materials. That's really what it's all about, because that's the area that's going to be attacked, and parents need to have an answer to their children when they ask them those questions. And that's why being a subscriber to Creation Magazine is so important. It's got a children's section in it, but it gives familiarises parents with the sorts of answers that they need to combat the teaching that the children are getting. So absolutely. I couldn't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, and of course there is the Creation website. Thousands of pages, easy to get to, and so many questions answered on there.
Yeah, creation.com. It's full of answers. And I mean, we are now in a day and age where parents really have to equip themselves, because their children are going to ask the questions, and they do have a big fight on their hands combating what they hear.
That we were created, not evolved from monkeys. And I believe there was another question that was almost an answer that came through as well, Dr. John.
It was, Mick, and quite obviously we don't want to overload little ones with technicalities that they're not going to understand. But I think as adults, and particularly if we're Christian parents, we need to have at least a working of understanding as to why evolution is impossible. And subsequent to that text, we got another one, quite a lengthy one, from a listener by the name of Jenny. And she asked the question, if evolution were true, and she elaborated on that, she said, the tiny changes from one species over a long period of time to have enough changes to create another species, where is the evidence that all these other in-between changes happened? She said, where's the evidence? And she said, it's more than a missing link. It's a million different missing links. Why are monkeys still here, she says, and none of the species in between? If there were improvements all over the previous body form, why didn't they not leave any trace? And why didn't the less evolved monkeys survive at all? Why did they?
Yeah.
You know, you would have thought that they would have died out. And she then said something that is absolutely true. She said, tiny changes related to the survival of the fittest can be seen, but it can be scientifically proven that they've got less information in their DNA. And I mean, that's absolutely true, that when you do get this natural selection, you do get less information in their DNA. And she said, is there any evidence of survival of the fittest changes happening where DNA information has grown or become better? And of course, the short answer is no. There are no examples of any process that can write additional bits of DNA information. No examples of that. We only ever see reshuffling of information that's already there. Okay? No process has ever been observed to write new sections of the program. And common sense tells us that that would be true, because no program ever wrote itself. And DNA is a very, very complex program. And I thought I might just mention those tiny changes, that they do actually prove the impossibility of evolution, because we've got to appreciate what those changes actually are. Now, all living things are controlled by their DNA program. Now, it's a biological program, very similar to a computer program, and we've all seen those computer programs written out in the sequential symbols. Well, DNA is composed of organic chemicals, 4 nucleotide bases, and for simplicity we give them their first letter, A, T, G and C, so that when you write it out you can see that it's a program. And our human program has got 3 billion letters in it. Now that's quite a lot, and you often hear it said that we're 98% similar to chimpanzees' DNA. Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. It's probably closer to 90. But even if it were 95% similar, that would be a difference of 150 million letters. Now that's a lot when you only get a change 1 letter at a time, which is what we call a mutation. And the interesting thing about mutations is that they're almost invariably harmful. They're not beneficial. So to expect any improvement or upward evolutionary progress by mutations, it's just a pipe dream. You know, you cannot get 150 million beneficial changes one letter at a time. That's just complete fantasy. But it's even worse than that, because the other supposed mechanism, as Jenny mentioned, is survival of the fittest. But you see, even if you did get a tiny beneficial change, all that's doing is changing the whole program by 1 letter at a time, what we call the genome. But survival of the fittest can't work on the genome. It's got to work on the total package, what we call the phenome, you know. And 1 letter change cannot make any difference to the total package. So survival of the fittest has got nothing to work on, even with 1 beneficial change, and they're very, very rare if they happen at all. So, you know, the monkey or ape supposed common ancestor has got no perceptible improvement to work on. And as I said before, you don't get there's no evidence of any genetic information ever being created anew. It's only shuffling of what's already there. And really, I mean, Jenny is quite right in the things that she said. Within a kind, it might result in speciation and adaptation to a changing environment, but it's always backwards. Now, we often use the example of animals in say a very, very cold climate developing long, furry, warm coats. Now, that happens. That's adaptation to the environment, and you don't find over time too many animals with short little furry coats. But they haven't actually evolved the information for those furry coats. It was already there. What they've done with that adaptation is they have got rid of the information for the short coats. Right? So it's natural selection, although it occurs, it's always backwards.
Losing information.
It gets rid of information. I mean, it might get improvement, but it gets improvement by losing information rather than gaining information. It just allows the good information to be better expressed. So it's quite interesting when you have a look at it. And you see a similar situation with what we call the superbugs. the bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics.
Yep.
They're not really superbugs. They have become resistant by losing information. They can't metabolize the antibiotic anymore, so they can't take it into their system, so it doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the mechanisms. There are many others, but it's their genetic inferiority that protects them from the antibiotic. Now, they do a great deal of damage, and they appear to be more virulent, but they're actually not. And I'm going to bring in, I haven't got them today, but I'm going to bring in a couple of little pamphlets on natural selection that people can pop into the studio and pick up, because it really is interesting. It happens by loss of information and not by gain.
Wow. You're on 94.9 this morning with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. Don't forget, you can go to the creation.com site to get any questions answered. But if you have a question, chances are lots of other people do. And we'd love to hear that question, because we can answer it on air for everybody. Just send the questions through to our text line, SMS 040 International, on this Tuesday with a catastrophic fire danger. Yes, it's forecast for our area and also Greater Sydney, Greater Hunter, Illawarra and Shoalhaven areas. That's due to worsening weather conditions. Large areas will see severe and extreme fire danger. These are very dangerous conditions. Schools have been closed all over the place. There's over 600 schools closed now. And of course, people are being evacuated from old age homes and that sort of thing. There's a lot of fear out there, Dr. John. I know that in Psalms 34 it says, "I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears." Well, how do people, how do they calm themselves down on a day like today?
Well, look, Mick, I think what we have to remember is that the Word of God does give us the encouragement that if we are believers and we put our trust in what the Word of God says, then we don't have anything to fear. And you just mentioned Psalm 34, but my favourite is Psalm 91. Mm-hmm. And Psalm 91 really tells you that whatever happens, no matter what it is, the Lord is with you and he is going to protect you. And we have nothing but his word to stand on. That's our guarantee of his protection. He has said it and he means it. And so we all have to put that into practice. It doesn't come naturally. We've got to apply the word to our everyday life, and let both of us encourage anybody out there who is faced with this catastrophic fire situation today. And I mean, we all are to some degree, but there will be people in more dangerous positions than we are right here in the studio. And really, they have nowhere but to turn but the Lord. Yeah. And he is the guarantee of their protection, and they need to put their trust in him.
Yeah. Now, of course, God does care more about people than our photos and our things and our homes. Yeah. In fact, the Bible is full of stories of, God saying, hey, don't build up those treasures on earth, because they really don't count that much. They're not going to help you in the whole scheme of things. Jesus gives life, and that life is eternal, which is a really long time. We're here for a really short time. We can build up treasures that are going to end up dust again. Yeah. So, he cares about you. And of course, if there is a fire near you, just get out of there. You're more important than the things. But Dr. John, this fear in a lot of people, I mean, we're seeing, I guess, people being evacuated from areas that are, well, whilst they're close to bush, they're a long way from any fires. What do you think about that at this stage?
Well, look, we're also living in a day and age where thank God for the media. They are there to inform us, and they do, but they can over-dramatise the situation, and they very often do. And I think this is the sort of thing that instills fear into people. Yes, fire is real. Yes, floods are real. Yes, cyclones are real, and yes, they do damage. But when you spend all day in front of your television, you can't help but absorb a lot of the fear that's going to come through that TV screen, and we have to put that aside and put our trust in what the Word of God says as it applies to us personally. That really is the only answer.
Yeah. I remember, this word catastrophic, it's, the media has talked about it because it is the first time in history that they've used it for our area. But we have to remember that catastrophic has only been part of their rating system for the last 10 years.
Yes.
So when they say the first time in history, well, it's really only the first time in 10 years.
It used to be extreme fire danger.
Yeah. Now, we've seen some pretty big fires on the Central Coast. We've seen massive fires in the Snowy Mountains. I mean, back before the word extreme was around, I can remember flying to the Australian surf lifesaving titles. We were flying from Sydney down to, I think we were going to Clifton Beach in Tasmania that year, and we flew over the Ash Wednesday fires. You remember that? They were huge fires, and of course, every year we hear about, that people lost in the fires and that sort of thing. Well, we haven't had fires here for a long time. And, of course, it's sort of good in so many ways that they put the fires out, but then a lot of the little fires that we used to get in days gone by now get put out, and so you get more and more rubbish build up. So potentially there could be worse fires in some areas. And no doubt with the extreme danger that we've got today, or the catastrophic danger, the fires in some areas will end up out of control because there's already fires out there. So, yes, beware. No, don't freak out. Don't save your stuff. Just get out, be safe, pray to God, and be happy that you got out of there.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yes. Any more words of wisdom about the fires, Dr. John?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think one of the things that I did see that disturbed me a bit by some politicians on TV last night was this bit about the air pollution. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, the air is polluted because we've got smoke in it, but that's not our norm. Yes, it is maybe worse in Brisbane at the moment than Beijing, but that's not the norm for Brisbane. And I thought it was wonderful to see the Queensland Premier on TV last night, Anastasia Palaszczuk, and what she did, she mentioned the pollution, but she said to people, if you have respiratory problems, then keep out of it and so on. She didn't sensationalise it. She mentioned it matter-of-factly and advised the people who are in her care to take care. And I thought she did a wonderful job. And I think the Premier in New South Wales, Gladys, has done a great job, and so has the Prime Minister. So I think we can be grateful for some of the leadership that we've got in this country.
Absolutely. You are on 94.9 this morning. Thank you, Dr. John. Another awesome morning. Are you going to be back next Tuesday?
I'll be here next Tuesday.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Dr. John. You're on 94.9 this morning. That was Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. If you have any burning questions, go to creation.com. If not, please send them through to us to our text line 0401 949 949.
That wasn't a very good choice of words, Mick. Any burning questions?
Yeah, that sometimes just sort of comes out. Any great questions? There you go. You're on 94.9. It is